So I wanted to welcome you to yet another Upper Zoom. Tonight, obviously, we'll be discussing, as Adam said, yet another pillar within the big three. Now, before again begin, we must define our terms and predominantly the virtue at hand, sobriety. So sobriety, as Joseph Gruber, one of our fellow missionaries and the guy who does our team developments, describes, it is to be aware of what is going on around us at every moment of every day. Now, I don't really love that. It seems too simple. So I decided to cultivate a more in-depth definition, and it can be stated as such. A continuous cognition of our interior landscape, how it's both reacting with and being influenced by our exterior landscape. I'll say that again. A continuous cognition of our interior landscape and how it's both reacting with and being influenced by our exterior landscape. Our interior landscape contains our emotions, our thoughts, and our desires. Our exterior contains all that is not within our mind, i.e., a lot of things. We as human beings, and especially young human beings, tend to have a vast and malleable interior landscape, which leaves us with a lot of thoughts, feelings, and desires that change rather rapidly. And the rate at which our interior landscape changes and is affected tends to be different from person to person. However, it's quite common to have one that is unchanging, or is quite uncommon to have one that is unchanging. And the variable that brings change within our interior landscape, as you might guess, is our exterior landscape. Pretty big variable, huh? So I'm going to address this issue as it presents itself in a couple of solutions. Number one, suppressing the interior landscape in light of negative, compulsive, or excessive actions. And number two, accepting our interior landscape in light of silence, fellowship, and divine intimacy. So our interior landscape, to start with number one, manifests itself consistently every day. And with its manifestations, it brings joy, excitement, surprise, sadness, anger, disgust, contempt, fear, etc. And on top of all these emotions that we feel, we also mingle in our thoughts, our desires, and they forever compound upon one another to create an incredibly vast and complex psyche. This interior landscape, our thoughts, feelings, and desires, are profoundly influenced and affected by the exterior landscape. For example, hypothetically, I have a desire to run a marathon, but as I train, my body can't handle the amount of miles that I'm running, but I decide to push through in my desire. And I keep running until I experience a stress fracture in my foot, putting me on the sideline in the boot for the next 4 months. This stress fracture leaves me thinking, wow, I can't believe I kept running. How stupid am I? And my feelings begin to manifest as anger, sadness, and loss. In this example, I made a poor decision to keep running. It left me in my feelings, specifically sad feelings, otherwise known as strongly negative emotions. So what happens next? My thoughts and emotions that have manifested due to an unfulfilled desire of mine are running amok amidst my interior landscape. Subconsciously and or consciously, I begin to weigh my options of negating these feelings. Now, I wish to be free of my anger, of my sadness, and my loss. What will help me not feel this way anymore? So I begin to contemplate, and a couple of things come to mind. Oh, I could drink my weight in whiskey. I could hook up with my significant other. I could go and have a one-night stand. I could masturbate and watch pornography. I could watch Netflix all day. Could listen to every album I've ever heard of. I could scroll through Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Vine, Venmo, GroupMe, YouTube, Goodreads. I could study longer, even though I've already studied for 8 hours today. I could self-deprecate. I could get high. And I could beg my friends to hang out with me, not talk about it. Or I could hang out with my friends and commiserate with them until they hate me. I could buy some new things, some new shoes to maybe fix the stretch fracture. I could oversleep. I could overeat, etc. You get the point. There's lots of things I could do to suppress. Now, some of these actions can be healthy, and most of them can be quite enjoyable, actually. However, if they're used in suppressing the interior, they are used in suppressing the interior when they become negative, compulsive, or excessive. For a simple example, Netflix, not intrinsically evil, surprising. And it actually can make us feel better for a moment. But in excess and compulsion, it can become sinful and suppressive. Suppression of our interior landscape is simply using something in our exterior landscape, social media, Netflix, alcohol, in a negative, compulsive, or excessive manner to avoid addressing our feelings, our thoughts, and our desires in an honest and healthy way. We must not suppress, but address our thoughts, feelings, and desires, especially when they manifest as the strongly negative kind. All this being said, a loss in sobriety constitutes a moment in which the exterior landscape is used in a negative, compulsive, or excessive way to suppress the interior. So that sounds like a pretty bad solution to me. But by the grace of God, we don't need to suppress. There's another way, and its fundamental principles, as I mentioned earlier, are silence, fellowship, and divine intimacy. If Christ is yours, then wealth is yours. He satisfies all your wants. He will look after you, manage all your affairs for you most dutifully. Put all your trust in God. Center him in all your fear and all your love. He will make himself responsible for you, and all will go as well as he sees best. Nothing will ever bring you rest except being closely united to Jesus. All your thoughts must be at home with God. All your prayer make its way up to Christ continually. That was Cardinal Seurat in The Power of Silence. So, you guys remember the exercise we did at the beginning of this talk. It wasn't too long ago. We found how we felt during a moment, specifically negative or hard moment in our life. And we found it through silence. I spoke to you a little, but it was mostly silence. And noise is the active agent in suppression. When we sit silently, we cannot but help to address our interior landscape. The exercise we did earlier is a great step in understanding the state of our interior landscape and what to do moving forward. It can be applied in almost any moment of strongly negative emotion. I know it might seem weird. You may be thinking to yourself, I'm not gonna start just doing breathing exercises in public. That's really weird. People are gonna think I'm crazy. They will, for sure. They will think you're crazy. But I offer a very practical tip: the bathroom. No one's gonna think you're crazy when they think you're just going to use the restroom. And I've used it plenty of times. This place is a safe haven for self-addressing, and everywhere you go, it's there. So, lastly, on silence and its necessity, we must understand our interior landscape and give ourselves some time to feel before talking to anyone so that we might not develop negative codependent relationships. When we bring our strongly negative emotions to people, we tend to trauma bond. And we don't want relations founded upon trauma and problems, but on goodness in Jesus Christ. A simple way to prevent this is to assess and understand your interior landscape before connecting with someone. And having a relationship with this person outside of coming to them with your problems is a necessity. With this in mind, our next step toward healthy and lasting sobriety is connection. Let's use the example from earlier. I'm feeling anger, sadness, and loss in regards to my injury. I've found that I feel this way due in part to our breathing exercise, which I probably did in a bathroom. And the next thing I do is I call a person on my list of very, very trusted advisors. My personal list includes my spiritual director, Father Marvin, my dad, Sean, my girlfriend, Becca, and one of my best friends, Jose, in that order. Anyone and everyone will offer you advice about your problems, if and when you come to them. So be sure you pick the right people, or you might be given the advice to simply suppress and move on. It's very important to seek good counsel, especially when the matters of interior landscape disruption are strong and intimate, i.e. a loss of a loved one. This action is very good and very simple because it serves the purpose of integrating our interior and exterior landscapes. We cannot live within our own heads, and connection with another human being pulls us out and back into reality where we must deal with our problems, so to speak, in the light. Lastly, but not leastly, we seek our true connection, our everlasting, glorious, beautiful, and most fulfilling connection, a connection with God. Notice how this comes last. Interesting, right? Shouldn't prayer always come first? Why am I going to a human person before God? Why am I doing breathing exercises in bathrooms before I pray? Simply because the devil hungers for your soul, and he desperately wants to keep you within your own head, away from reality and lost within yourself. I'll bring Cardinal Serrata back up my point. The world can pursue man anywhere he may go to hide, even in the silence and solitude of a cloister. Pride, the passions, and hypocrisy seek to reassert their worst rights over the soul everywhere. The devil works within your head, in the darkness. But if we bring our interior landscape into the light, we can be free, for light dispels our darkness, including the devil. After bringing our interior to another, we will find ourselves in the chapel with a balanced interior landscape that has been rightly integrated back into the exterior landscape, and unity with God will come. Unity with God is our ultimate destiny, and it will never leave us unfulfilled. But if we come to prayer unprepared, unity will be a struggle. This last step is the most essential. Unless we find what our heart is looking for, we will never be fulfilled, and we will always run back to suppression. We must seek God and find him within ourselves, others, and in the sacraments. So to close, we have two options in dealing with our emotions, in dealing with our interior landscape. Number one, you can suppress the interior landscape in the light of negative, compulsive, or excessive actions. Or you can use silence to balance your interior landscape, connection with another to integrate it, and divine intimacy to give our soul what it truly longs for. You were made for a connection with God, not for suppression. The Lord loves you and desires the utmost beautiful, intimate, and loving connection with you. And he wants to know the truth of your heart. If you're having a trouble, the Lord doesn't want to hear prayers that say that you aren't. If you're struggling, the Lord doesn't want to hear that you're not. He knows that you are. He will never force himself upon you. And so you must simply go to him and say, I am in pain. And it's okay to be upset with him. And he loves you despite it. And the Lord will always find you where you are most honest with him. Honesty with ourselves, honesty with another, and honesty with God will bring sobriety. Sobriety can be equated to true honesty. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen.